All right. And how we start our meeting out is we do the third step prayer just to get a little bit of focus. Rob, if you'd help us.
Of course. Hi, everybody. My name is Rob Kay. I am a recovered alcoholic. And you can find the third step prayer on page 63 of your big book if you want to follow along. God, I offer myself to thee, to build with me and do with me as thou wilt. Relieve me of the bondage of self, that I may better do thy will. Take away my difficulties, the victory over them may bear witness to those I would help of thy power, thy love, and thy way of life. May I do thy will always.
Okay. Thank you, Rob. All right. We are near the bottom. It's the last paragraph. We'll kind of, let's go up to men have cried out to me insincere. Rob,
men have start. Of course. Okay. Men have cried out to me in sincere and despairing appeal. Doctor, I cannot go on like this. I have everything to live for. I must stop, but I cannot. You must help me. Faced with this problem, if a doctor is honest with himself, he must sometimes feel his own inadequacy. Although he gives all that is in him, it often is not enough. One feels that something more than human power is needed to produce the essential psychic change. Though the aggregate of recoveries resulting from psychiatric effort is considerable, we physicians must admit we have made little impression upon the problem as a whole. Many types do not respond to the ordinary psychological approach.
Okay, so what we're talking about here is, in the doctor's opinion, is Dr. Silkworth. He's writing to us to let us know his experience with Bill Wilson and others that have been able to recover, but not necessarily using the medical means that that they have at their disposal, meaning the doctors. Also, just as a sidebar, they were reluctant to let these folks like Bill come in and help because it was basically admitting that they needed something more than just their medical capabilities to reach these alcoholics. So, and we've talked about this. Part of the reason I think that they were allowed in is that they didn't get any pay or they didn't profit from their efforts with these folks. Not only that, but they could see the progress that had been made in Bill and others, and they had to admit, and that's what they're basically saying here, is you've got a person that is admitting that they are powerless over alcohol. The first sentence and that declaration that's made there is basically saying it in somebody else's words. I'm powerless over this. How do I get past this? Powerless, meaning that I'm no human power right now is capable of making any real progress other than parts. I mean, obviously, if you remove alcohol from somebody over a period of time, they're going to improve. If you give them some physical exercise, they're going to improve. If you give them something good to eat, their diet and everything is going to improve. So you've got a person now that's on the up and up, if you will, but still having that malady, the insanity of the mind where they just cannot stay away from that first drink. So that's kind of what we're doing here. But actually what's happening is the Dr. Silkworth is admitting that there is something larger than the person that is required in order to reach this level of a person that is a real alcoholic. All right, Rob.
Okay, everybody, we're at the bottom of page XXIX. I do not hold with those who believe that alcoholism is entirely a problem of mental control. I have had many men who had, for example, worked a period of months on some problem or business deal, which was to be settled on a certain date, favorably to them. They took a drink a day or so prior to the date, and then the phenomenon of craving at once became paramount to all their interests, so that the important appointment was not met. These men were not drinking to escape. They were drinking to overcome a craving beyond their mental control.
Okay, so here we are. And this is time and time and time again. People will admit that they've been successful. They've been contributing members of society. And yet here we are. They cannot, for the life of them, stay away from that drink because of that the insanity. Once they take that drink, and here's another reference to the allergy that we talk about. Once you've taken that drink, you can't stop. You just keep going until something happens, whether you've run out of alcohol, you've passed out, or some calamity happens that it just becomes untenable for you to be able to do anything else. But nonetheless, at the end of all of that, it is a debacle. And I use some of the words that they use in the book in my description here. But overcoming that has been a very, very hard thing to do. Yet here we are with people that are not drinking to forget. They're just drinking because they can't stay away from it. This isn't a time, you know, he's describing a guy that is actually doing something that's good, that is favorable, that is not just, hey, I lost my job, so I'm just going to drink. They're not drinking to forget. All right. That's also a reason why people drink. Don't get me wrong. I'm just saying that people also are drinking here because of the fact that they can't stay away from it. It doesn't matter whether it's good or bad. They're just drinking. Rob?
There are many situations which arise out of the phenomenon of craving, which cause men to make the supreme sacrifice rather than continue to fight. The classification of alcoholics seems most difficult, and in much detail is outside the scope of this book. There are, of course, the psychopaths who are emotionally unstable. We're all familiar with this type. They are always going on the wagon for keeps. They are over-remorseful and make many resolutions, but never a decision.
So a couple of things here. Back at the very first, what arise from the phenomenon of craving, which men cause to make the supreme sacrifice rather than continue to fight. This is serious stuff, folks. We're talking about a supreme sacrifice is that they drink until they die. So when we're here, because that's what we are not choosing to do. That is what we're trying not to achieve. We don't want to have an early death. We don't want it to be caused by alcohol, etc. Classification of alcoholics is also difficult. We'll talk a little bit about the different levels of drinkers and that type of thing coming up. It is in this book. And then there are others there that, you know, they do refer to some people that are that have other underlying conditions. And I guess it's more of a statement here is that we're not psychiatrists. We're not counselors. We're not medical doctors. So in those cases, we're not really capable of reaching them in all of the areas that they need to be reached. So just as a qualification here for that, we're not there. But it does say this: the over remorseful and make many resolutions. I think to a person in this room, I can say that every one of us has made promises in the past, and they just immediately, if not within short order, have broken those promises. I'm never going to drink again. Get me through this, and I promise I won't drink again. You know, I promise I'm not going to drink. I promise. Well, guess what? Gosh, what a life that was. All right, Rob.
Okay. So remember, the first type is psychopaths that they talk about in the book here. Now, here's the second type. There is a type of man who is unwilling to admit that he cannot take a drink. He plans various ways of drinking. He changes his brand or his environment. There is the type who always believes that after being entirely free from alcohol, for a period of time, he can take a drink without danger. There is the manic depressive type, who is perhaps the least understood by his friends and about whom a whole chapter could be written.
Okay, so we're talking here, and Rob touched on it. I apologize. I just, it's why we both are here, but the different types, these are different types of people with the different types of motivations, if you will, as far as what's causing them to want to drink. I think one of the ones that we probably identify as much as anything is the unwilling to admit that he cannot take a drink. And the person that just thinks that that's all there is I have to drink. And yet they change they go from brown liquor to wine or beer, or they go and they say, I'm only going to drink on certain days, or I'm only going to drink at certain times. et cetera, et cetera. And obviously that kind of things doesn't work at all. Alcohol is alcohol. Alcohol is alcohol. It doesn't really matter what form of alcohol you're drinking. Yep, certainly certain alcohols have different effects on people. I can admit to that. Certain ones caused me to be, I would just say, an angrier person in my drunkenness. Others caused me to be a little bit more withdrawn and remorseful. But anyway, so these are different types of people. Some of them understood, some of them not so understood, but it's just giving you some ideas with regard to what the psychiatric side of medical attention as they have branded and identified people as.
Then there are types entirely normal in every respect, except in the effect alcohol has upon them. They are often able, intelligent, friendly people. All these and many others have one symptom in common. They cannot start drinking without developing the phenomenon of craving. This phenomenon, as we have suggested, may be the manifestation of an allergy which differentiates these people and sets them apart as a distinct entity. It has never been, by any treatment with which we are familiar, permanently eradicated. The only relief we have to suggest is entire abstinence.
All right, that paragraph you should highlight and underline, put an asterisk by, because it's the first time we actually have that, what we'll call Dr. Silkworth's diagnosis as an allergy to alcohol. We talk about this in a lot going forward, but this is the first point where he makes it as a direct problem. It is something we can relate to. It's something we can hold on to. It's something that we can actually say, yes, that has happened to me. And it is that allergy that once you've taken that first drink, the allergy kicks in and you cannot stop. It also I want to make sure that we know that it's never eradicated. That allergy will always be there. Once you've developed this allergy, it's there. No matter how long you don't drink, no matter how long you live, you'll always have that. And the only relief that you can have to this allergy is complete abstinence. So, all right. Complete abstinence. And right now that's a declaration. It is a hard and fast. It's a black and white. It's something we live with and it's something we believe in. And I'm saying this to a person here, me. So how do we get there? And that's why we're here. That's why we're doing what we're doing. How do we get there? All right. So it's easier said than done. I know that. And and there's work that has to be done with it, but I'm just telling you that that's what we're going to get to. And I guess what I also want to make a note here is there really is no such thing as a program of moderation with this type of alcoholic. You're just not going to be able to, reduce your amount of drinking and think that that's going to fix the problem. You're going to be unable to reduce. You may think you can, but you won't be able to if you're this kind of alcoholic.
So that means that if I quit drinking for a couple of months, I can't go back to drinking?
That's exactly what it means, Rob.
Because the allergy is always going to be there. And we have to remember that our metabolisms as we get older slows down. So we can't break down the alcohol quickly. So, even if we quit for 10, 15 years, our metabolism is slowed down, and getting rid of alcohol, breaking it down in our bodies just get harder to break it down. So keep that in mind. The allergy will always be there. This immediately precipitates us into a seething cauldron of debate. Much has been written pro and con, but among physicians, the general opinion seems to be that most chronic alcoholics are doomed.
Yep, and that last part of that statement right there is, and I've written this down, you're going to die as an alcoholic. You're going to die as an alcoholic death if you do not get this. And that's what's going to happen. So point being is that this is very, very serious. People are dying from this all the time. and we're here to try and get you to find that inner strength, that higher power, and achieve a level of sobriety and recovery so that you can live a much happier, much more productive, and much more fulfilling and satisfying life. That's really the crux of all of this, is to find that higher power to help you get through this.
You know, Leo, we talk about an alcoholic death, and a lot of times suicide is the solution for an awful lot of people. The problem is that they don't see any way out, so they take their own lives.
Yeah.
Our purpose is we know what the problem is, we have the solution, and we will show you the course of action to take. And that's what this whole big book is about, is to give us the way out. What is the solution? Perhaps I can best answer this by relating one of my experiences. About 1 year prior to this experience, a man was brought in to be treated for chronic alcoholism. He had but partially recovered from a gastric hemorrhage and seemed to be a case of pathological mental deterioration. He had lost everything worthwhile in life and was only living, one might say, to drink. He frankly admitted and believed that for him there was no hope. Following the elimination of alcohol, there was found to be no permanent brain injury. He accepted the plan outlined in this book. 1 year later.
Real quick, I don't want to stop you other than to say that this is Hank Parkhurst as a person. We kind of had initially come to know him as a non-believer. His story is in the back of the book as the non-believer.
He was in the first edition.
The first edition, I apologize. And I want to, Rob, take just a minute and talk about Hank, if you wouldn't mind.
Oh, Hank is a fascinating character. He was an incredible businessman. One person said that in the 1930s, he was making $20,000 a year. Bill said that he was making $40,000 a year. Incredible amount of money working for Standard Oil, which was part of the Rockefeller contingent. And he pushed Bill to make sure that this book got written. If it wasn't for Hank, this book would not be around. One of the problems is that the reason you don't hear about Hank is that just after this book was published, he went back out drinking. He had a resentment for different reasons. And so, of course, his story, which was called The Unbeliever in the first edition, was obviously taken out. His whole history is sort of wiped away. He also wrote to the employers, which is in the further on in the book. As I say, if he hadn't gone out drinking, this man would have been a co-founder of AA, and he would be up there with Bill, an actual saint, because without him, this book would not be written. We wouldn't be here probably on Zoom talking to each other, carrying this message that was, so beautifully given to us. So that's my take on Hank. Bill, I'm sure at the end can give you a lot more on Hank. But as I say, the more I hear about it, the more I learn about Hank, the more I come to, have so much respect for what he did. Just couldn't stay sober though. And that's, if you don't stay sober in this, you're out. So he had a gastric hemorrhage, which is what we consider today a bleeding ulcer. So I just want to throw that in too. 1 year later, he called to see me, and I experienced a very strange sensation. I knew the man by name and partly recognized his features, but there all resemblance ended. From a trembling, despairing, nervous wreck had emerged a man brimming over with self-reliance and contentment. I talked with him for some time, but was not able to bring myself to feel that I had known him before. To me, he was a stranger, and so he left. A long time has passed with no return to alcohol.
Okay, so point here is that Hank was able to stop drinking for a long period of time, or at least a period of time. Much improvement happened. I'll tell you real quick. I saw from my own drinking and the years that I had put into that effort had taken its toll on me. And it was even 9 months after I've stopped drinking, I had experiences where my health had improved over a period of time that it wasn't for 9 months that I started to notice some improvements in other areas of my health. So I won't go through the full story on that, but I'll just tell you that, just because you've stopped drinking and you feel better a week later, which you certainly will, and it's a good thing, don't get me wrong, that is certainly an achievement, and it's also something to want to have happen. The real effects of alcohol on your body are going to take months and months to actually find the improvement and feel and see it. So it is a long-term effect, both on the bad and on the improvement. So there are benefits that go far beyond that first month or 3 that you've stopped drinking that you're going to experience going forward. And I can attest to that in my own life with certain things that happened to me, and I was able to achieve and find out and learn 9 to 10 months later after I had stopped drinking. So, Rob?
When I need a mental uplift, I often think of another case brought in by a physician prominent in New York. The patient had made his own diagnosis and deciding his situation hopeless. He had hidden in a deserted barn, determined to die. He was rescued by a searching party and in desperate condition brought to me. Following his physical rehabilitation, he had a talk with me in which he frankly stated he thought the treatment a waste of effort, unless I could assure him, which no one ever had, that in the future he would have the willpower to resist the impulse to drink. His alcohol problem was so...
Go ahead, Rob. I'm sorry.
I'll just finish this a little bit. His alcohol problem was so complex and his depression so great that we felt his only hope would be through what we then called moral psychology. And we doubted if even that would have any effect.
Okay. And we are, of course, talking about Fitz Mayo. His name is Fitz Mayo. And I believe, if I'm wrong here, Rob, his story is on page 208.
That is correct. Our Southern friend.
Yep. So if you wanted to take a minute and talk about Fitz, if you wanted.
I'll be honest with you. I know he's from Hancock, Missouri, and he was the number 3 guy in New York. But that's about all I know about Fitz.
That's fine. And I think the other point I'd like to make out at the very bottom here, it's a light reference, but when we talk about going through what was then called a moral psychology, we're talking about steps 4 and 5. That's as close as we can get to what the moral psychology was, meaning that he took some time to write down his fears and et cetera. And he talked to another person about all of his resentments and his fears and that type of thing. So when they talk about a moral psychology here, we're talking about what became steps 4 and 5. Rob?
Okay, now we're on page XXXII, the last page of the doctor's opinion. However, he did become sold on the ideas contained in this book. He has not had a drink for a great many years. I see him now and then, and he is as fine a specimen of manhood as one could wish to meet. I earnestly advise every alcoholic to read this book through, and though perhaps he came to scoff, he may remain to pray. William D. Silkworth, MD.
Absolutely. What probably one of the best chapters. Well, I might say the best chapter, but one of the best chapters that we've got in this book. It's really not a chapter because it's obviously before we get to chapter 1, but they put this in here as an introduction. Originally, it was going to be another chapter in the book, but I think that when you look at some of the things that they were trying to do and move things around, I think it was Tom, and I may, is it Utzel? Is it, if I say his name correctly, he's the one that was the editor of the book. And I know that he moved some things around, including putting Bill's story as chapter 1, which is what we're getting ready to read now. So I can't overemphasize reading the doctor's opinion. As a whole, the book really starts at the very beginning, which is the title page, and it goes all the way through that we cover to the end of 164. but there's so much more than just page 1 to 164, as you can well see and hear and know as we've just gone through the rest of that. So, all right, we are going to embark on chapter 1, which is page 1, and that is Bill's story, and we are talking about Bill W. So sit back and enjoy it. It's going to be a good one.
All I can think of is Gilligan's Island. Just sit right back and we'll tell a tale.
Yeah, there you go.
Bill's story, we're on page 1, everybody. War fever ran high in the New England town to which we knew young officers from Plattsburgh were assigned. And we were flattered when the first citizens took us into their homes, making us feel heroic. There was love, applause, war, moments sublime with intervals hilarious. I was part of life at last, and in the midst of the excitement, I discovered liquor. I forgot the strong warnings and the prejudices of my people concerning drink. In time, we sailed for over there. I was very lonely and again turned to alcohol. We landed in England. I visited Winchester Cathedral. Much moved, I wandered outside. My attention was caught by a doggerel on an old tombstone. Here lies a Hampshire grenadier who caught his death drinking cold, small beer. A good soldier ne'er forgot whether he dieth by musket or by pot.
Okay, so we're learning a little bit about Bill. Obviously, he was in the Army and was an officer, was stationed and moved to England, and for a short period of time there, went to the Winchester Cathedral. This tombstone is the date on it was May 12th of 1764, just so that you know that. And one of the things I wanted to talk about here is this person obviously died as an alcoholic, all right? And what they talk about here is drinking cold small beer, which is what was considered a low alcohol content beer. So when they talk about small beer, that's what they were referring to back in the 1700s. And then whether he dieth by musket or by pot being a mug or tankard of beer. I'm not sure exactly what they were drinking from back in the 1700s, but I have to admit it's probably a mug or a tankard of some kind. But that's just a little bit of history of that particular tombstone there. Rob?
I just want to mention that Bill entered the Army in 1917. As Leo said, the cold small beer is 1% to 2% alcohol. So the amount of bacteria that was probably in the water at that time was quite high. And so you could basically, dysentery would run through your body. And I don't think they had penicillin. I shouldn't, I kid, but obviously they didn't have penicillin at that time. So you could, actually die from this stuff because your body just is going in one end and coming out the other end. So, ominous warning, which I failed to heed. 22 and a veteran of foreign wars, I went home at last. I fancied myself a leader, for had not the men of my battery given me a special token of appreciation, my talent for leadership, I imagined, would place me at the head of vast enterprises, which I would manage with the utmost assurance. I took a night law course and obtained employment as an investigator for a surety company. The drive for success was on. I'd proved to the world I was important. My work took me about Wall Street, and little by little, I became interested in the market. Many people lost money, but some became very rich. Why not I? I studied economics and business as well as law. Potential alcoholic that I was. I nearly failed my law course. At one of the finals, I was too drunk to think or write. Though my drinking was not yet continuous, it disturbed my wife. We had long talks when I would still her forebodings by telling her that men of genius conceive their best projects when drunk, that the most majestic constructions of philosophic thought were so derived.
Yeah. I have to smile a little bit, but I'm not really smiling. This is a very serious paragraph here, or a section. And what's important here is that Bill is what we would call today is probably an overachiever, had experienced some success. Not only was he studying economics, but also business and also law. He went to Brooklyn Law School and And in all of that, though, he's finding that his binges or his sprees, as they might call them in this book, are causing him problems with regard to his commitments and responsibilities, and in this case, exams that he needs to pass in order to get his degree. But on top of that, we talk about his drinkings being not continuous. So, there are days now where he is not drinking at all, or if he was drinking very little. So his disease, as we're going to call it, and this allergy had not really come to full fruition at that point. And not only this, but here's where we all can relate to, and this is long talks, and I would tell still of her forebodings. She, his wife, knew he had a problem probably way before he would actually admit that he had a problem. Whether he knew he had a problem or not remains, but the fact is she knew he had a problem back before he would even admit it. And here he is making up excuses, and he's probably making some promises in here as well. I promise I won't do this again. I promise I won't let this happen again. And oh, by the way, great people, great minds do their best work when they've been drinking. Come on. So, boy, I can remember saying certain things like that. Maybe not exactly in those words, but something to that end. I get, I closed a deal after over a bunch of drinks. It took the drinks in order to get me there, something to that effect. I don't know, but that's certainly something I can relate to. All right, Rob.
So you guys were so drunk that you had to sign it with an X on the contract.
That's exactly right. And they missed the line. It was just on the page.
I want to bring a couple of points up. Prohibition was January 1920 to December 1933. Okay, so remember this when we're going through Bill's story. Now, Bill's story is a case study on somebody who starts out as not a non-alcoholic, goes through alcoholism, finds a course of action, the solution, etc. Okay, so when you're keeping this in mind, please remember that, because while he was going through his alcoholic days, prohibition was going on. So it's not like you can go to the corner store, pick up a bottle, and bring it home. You had to go and find, the bootleggers and all these people who were selling it under the table. So it isn't as easy to get alcohol as it is today, where, the liquor stores on the corners, there are bars everywhere. They had to go to speakeasies. So I just wanted to keep that in mind. By the time I had completed the course, I knew the law was not for me. The inviting maelstrom of Wall Street had me in its grip. Business and financial leaders were my heroes. Out of this alloy of drink and speculation, I commenced to forge the weapon that one day would turn in its flight like a boomerang and all but cut me to ribbons. Living modestly, my wife and I saved $1,000. It went into certain securities, then cheap and rather unpopular. I rarely imagined that they would someday have a great rise. I failed to persuade my broker friends to send me out looking over factories and managements, but my wife and I decided to go anyway. I had developed a theory that most people lost money in stocks through ignorance of markets. I discovered many more reasons later on. We gave up our positions and off we roared on a motorcycle, the sidecar stuffed with tent, blankets, a change of clothes, and 3 huge volumes of a financial reference service. Our friends thought a lunacy commission should be appointed. Perhaps they were right. I had had some success at speculation, so we had a little money. But we once worked on a farm for a month to avoid drawing on our small capital. That was the last honest manual labor on my part for many a day. We covered the whole eastern United States in a year. At the end of it, my reports to Wall Street procured me a position there and the use of a large expense account. The exercise of an option brought in more money, leaving us with a profit of several $1,000s for that year.
Okay, so a couple of things here. I think that, we're looking at the beginning of somebody that does research. Right now, I would tell you that you wouldn't have to ride a motorcycle and cover the whole East Coast. You simply would have to go to a computer and get on the internet. But nonetheless, think of the brilliance that Bill had at the moment with regard to his approach to business and financial investments and that type of thing. He took it on himself to go out and spend some time. And probably during this time, I would gather, because it's not really talked about that much, but his drinking was probably still under control. Now, he was drinking, no doubt, because he talks about the boomerang effect and cutting him to ribbons. Obviously, he was mastering his skill set with regard to drinking. And I use that kind of loosely. It's not necessarily something that anybody should and want to achieve. One historical note is this farm that he worked on was by the person of the name of Ella Goodfoot, if I got that right. Is that right, Rob? Goldfoot. Yep, that's right. I just couldn't read my own writing. And it was a farm in New York that they spent some time on. But nonetheless, he gets back with these reports, and because of these reports, obviously people took notice, and the research was sound research, and it had a good approach, and obviously set Bill up for a lot of success going forward. Rob?
For the next few years, fortune threw money and applause my way. I had arrived. My judgment and ideas were followed by many to the tune of paper millions. The great boom of the late 20s was seething and swelling. Drinking was taking an important and exhilarating part in my life. There was loud talk in the jazz places uptown. Everyone spent in thousands and chattered in millions. Scoffers could scoff and be damned. I made a host of fair-weathered friends.
Okay, so obviously he is surrounded by a lot of people that are actually, like anything, you start to find yourself kind of a bird of a feather. So a lot of drinkers getting together, buying drinks for each other. And as you start to buy drinks for each other, then obviously these fair weather friends are going to be with you through the thick part of things, not the thin, but the thick. So when I say that, I'm telling you that these people were, enjoying a lot of the fruits of their labor, fruits of each other's labors, and obviously getting the hangers on, if you will, of those that were the more successful, that were buying drinks for them and enjoying their company. And we can all relate to that. We circle ourselves in the beginning with a lot of people that are like us, in the sense that our socioeconomic levels, our demographics, and obviously our level of drinking. We want to find that we're also surrounded to reinforce that drinking behavior that is becoming a problem. Rob?
My drinking assumed more serious proportions, continuing all day and almost every night. The remonstrances of my friends terminated in a row, and I became a lone wolf. There were many unhappy scenes in our sumptuous apartment. There had been no real infidelity, for loyalty to my wife, helped at times by extreme drunkenness, kept me out of those scrapes.
Yeah. So obviously we're moving from, let's call it, a loose control of drinking, meaning that the sprees are still met with a lot of what you might call false happiness. But over a period of time, people started to take notice that there was, in fact, a problem with Bill, and started to remove themselves from his presence. He found that he became a lone drinker, and I can tell you, to a person, I was that kind of person. Even if I was around other people, I was by myself because I had become a drinker that would hide, and I would lie, and it became very problematic, because I might at one given time have 2 or 3 drinks that were going at the same time. And showing that I'm drinking a glass of wine, that was my decoy. Whereas behind the refrigerator on the other side of the cabinet or something might have a drink of bourbon there that I was drinking from, in order to get to that point and in my alcoholism. So not only was I potentially around other people trying my best to fit in, which obviously other people knew. I thought that they didn't, but people knew. It's, you know, just an unfortunate thing. There is a reference here that just so that you know where they lived. One thing is they were at 38 in Livingston. I'm not sure if that matters to anybody, but that's just a historical fact. And he makes a reference here that there had been no real infidelity for loyalty to my wife, helped at times by extreme drunkenness. It means that there was probably some temptation there, I guess, but little to be acted upon, because obviously his being so drunk that he couldn't even probably carry a conversation with people. So he largely stayed away from those things. And I'm always intrigued by the reference that he makes in this particular point here. But I think he's basically saying that he found himself not only alone, but looking for that companionship, because at some point in time, I'm sure that his wife had decided to stay away from him as well. And there became a gap between them in their relationship because of his drinking.
Well, here is a good point where frothy emotional appeal, which I'm sure his wife was using constantly on him, because as it says, you know, there were many unhappy scenes in our, you know, she's trying to get, you know, Bill, you know, maybe you got to stop drinking, or, you know, slow down. And frothy emotional appeal seldom suffices. Perfect point right there. You know, the people around us see the problem way before we ourselves feel that there's a problem. I can handle it. I've got control of it. You know, I need to do this for work. You know, we come up with 1,001 excuses. None of them make sense in the light of day, but we still think we can. Bill still thinks he can control and enjoy his drinking at this point, even though he's a continuous drinker now. In 1929, I contracted golf fever. We went at once to the country, my wife to applaud while I started out to overtake Walter Hagen. Liquor caught up with me much faster than I came up behind Walter. I began to be jittery in the morning. Golf permitted drinking every day and every night. It was fun to caroom around the exclusive course which had inspired such awe in me as a lad. I acquired the impeccable coat of tan one sees upon the well-to-do. The local banker watched me whirl fat checks in and out of his till with amused skepticism.
So obviously there's a change of environment that's not uncommon for a drinker. In this case, you know, Walter Hagen, just as a note at the time, was #3 rated golfer in the nation that we know of at this point, maybe in the world. But at least in this case, he was #3. So it appears that that Bill had become quite the golfer. If he was able to hold his own, at least respectfully, with the likes of Walter Hagen, I would tell you that that's quite the deal. But obviously, a lot of golfers, even to me, drinking was front and center when it came to playing golf. Being jittery in the morning, obviously, we're talking about the withdrawal symptoms that a lot of people feel. I, for one, had that, and I'll be honest, it had been misdiagnosed. I had gone to a doctor and had been diagnosed with a tremor and had taken medication to control that. So my situation was so bad that I was now taking medication to control my withdrawal. Now, that wasn't known at the time, and I will tell you that I did that for more than 12 years, taking this medication to control my tremors, and they weren't really tremors. If you remember me talking about an experience I had after about 9 or 10 months of non-drinking, those tremors, that jitteriness went away, and I was able to wean myself off completely from that medication. So just to let you know the benefits and the success I've had health-wise with my not drinking, that certainly is part of that. So so we're here now where to act normal in life, Bill is having to drink in order to get back to a point where he is not jittery and shaking. So a bad place to be, to have alcohol get you to appear normal at this point.
Abruptly.
Go ahead.
Okay, abruptly in October 1929, hell broke loose on the New York Stock Exchange. After one of those days of inferno, I wobbled from a hotel bar to a brokerage office. It was 8 o'clock, 5 hours after the market closed. The ticker still clattered. I was staring at an inch of tape which bore the inscription XYZ minus 32. It had been 52 that morning. I was finished, and so were many friends. The papers reported men jumping to death from the towers of high finance. That disgusted me. I would not jump. I went back to the bar. My friends had dropped several million since 10 o'clock. So what? Tomorrow was another day. As I drank, the old fierce determination to win came back.
Certainly did. And you know, thank goodness he didn't jump. His resolve to not jump was obviously here. One reference I want to make here is that we say, and he uses the capital letters in high finance. At the time, I'm going to tell you that that's Bill's higher power. Bill was all about the money. All about the money. So that just as a point of reference there as we go along. But obviously, things are bad. People are dying and all around. And he decides he's just going to go and drown the event with alcohol. Not uncommon to a lot of us in a loss of a job or a loss of a friend or whatever it might be. We just decide we're going to drink, and it's a common thing, a common theme, if you will, with alcoholics.
So Bill's solution was to drink.
Yep.
Okay. Next morning, I telephoned a friend in Montreal. He had plenty of money left and thought I had better go to Canada. By the following spring, we were living in our accustomed style. I felt like Napoleon returning from Elba. No St. Helena for me. But drinking caught up with me again, and my generous friend had to let me go. This time, we stayed broke.
Yeah. So this person is Dick Johnson, that he was friends with up in Montreal, and the time frame that he was going up there was the Christmas time frame of 1929, and like by the following spring, he was already living again in their accustomed style, but the drinking caught up to him. And when he says that the friend had to let him go, he was actually fired because of his inability to work because of his drinking. So his opportunities have now become zero. There it is. He's reaching another new level of bottom, if you will, for what most people would say. Rob?
We went to live with my wife's parents. I found a job, then lost it as a result of a brawl with a taxi driver. Mercifully, no one could guess that I was to have no real employment for 5 years or hardly draw a sober breath. My wife began to work in a department store, coming home exhausted to find me drunk.
Absolutely. So a couple of things here. Living with your wife's parents, they don't have anything to show for themselves. They found the job and then lost it. As the story goes, I think he was on his way to his first day of work for this particular job, and he got in an argument and a brawl with the taxi driver, and because of that, lost the job. Just as another point of reference here, his wife began working at Macy's. So that would be the department store, and coming home to find Bill drunk. So obviously he's not even contributing to, taking any care of anything around the house or anything like that while she's out there trying to make ends meet.
I became an unwelcome hanger-on at brokerage places. Liquor ceased to be a luxury. It became a necessity. Bathtub gin.
Say that one more time, Rob. This is a very important sentence, and it's something I would tell you to highlight and underline.
Liquor ceased to be a luxury. It became a necessity. Bathtub gin, 2 bottles a day, and often 3, got to be routine. Sometimes a small deal would net a few $100s, and I would pay my bills at the bars and delicatessens. This went on endlessly, and I began to waken very early in the morning, shaking violently. A tumbler of gin, followed by half a dozen bottles of beer, would be required if I were to eat any breakfast. Nevertheless, I still thought I could control the situation, and there were periods of sobriety which renewed my wife's hopes.
Okay, so a lot is said in this particular paragraph, and obviously he has reached an even lower low as well here, and with everything going on. So liquor no longer is a luxury. That means he's not enjoying his drinking. There is no enjoyment anymore in it. And this is the progression of alcoholism. And he has no choice anymore. So I want to make that as a point of reference too. He's at a point now where he cannot not drink. He is forced to drink in order to even become any semblance of normal. And the other thing too is notice that he goes, and when he gets money, he pays the bars and delicatessens first. I mean, he is keeping up his routine and his efforts here to make sure that alcohol is always going to be available to him, even if it's on credit. So he basically makes sure that he pays his bills as he gets any money going forward. And the other part here is he makes this declaration. He still thought that he could control the situation, which obviously he could not. And when he says that there are still some periods of sobriety, which renewed his wife's hope, he thought that self-will could fix himself with himself. Okay, so this is obviously a falsehood, but that's still at that progression of alcoholism that we've been there, where we all think that we can fix self with self. And I'll just say that he basically is white knuckling it through these periods of sobriety. These are not true periods of sobriety. What has been come to known as outside of this book, but is called a dry drunk, basically is that you have still not gotten that inner strength and that higher power as of yet. You are basically white knuckling it through a period of time, whether that's a day, a week, or whatever. You're still hopeless in this regard. Even if it does help your wife to enjoy those periods, or your partner, or just other friends and family. It's a well-known, highly relatable situation that Bill has found himself in, that we to this day can relate to.
I love the fact that they talk about bathtub gin. Remember the time period. Yeah. We're in Prohibition. So bathtub gin was actually made in a bathtub. Okay, similar to moonshine. Sometimes these people didn't know what they were getting. Some people can go blind from some of this stuff that they get, but 2 to 3 bottles a day, incredible. And I still thought I could control the situation. The Great Obsession, page 23 and 30, that one day I will be able to control and enjoy my drinking, is the great obsession of every alcoholic. Yes. Gradually, things got worse. The house was taken over by the mortgage holder. My mother-in-law died. My wife and father-in-law became ill. Then I got a promising business opportunity. Stocks were at a low point in 1932, and I had somehow formed a group to buy. I was to share generously in the profits. Then I went on a prodigious bender, and that chance vanished.
Yep. And I've got a couple of notes here. It was a 3 days of drinking, and it was a big bender for him. There is a reference to this, is that it was a particular alcohol called Applejack, and it was something that was known as New Jersey moonshine. I don't know if that matters to most people, but it is one of those little facts that you might want to know what he's doing. But obviously, he gets another opportunity. Here is this point where, this man is a very smart man. He's very good at business. If he could only recover from alcohol, and he finds himself able to pull together a team of people that are willing to invest in these stocks. And then boom, before everything is to all come together, he goes out and he drinks when things are good. Again, a reference to the uncontrollability that he's got over his drinking, and he must drink. And he goes out on a big bender on this stuff called Applejack, and 3 days, and it just completely vanishes. So Again, alcohol has been the foe in his life, and there's not much life to be lived at this point. So he is at a very low point in his life. Rob?
You know, the doctor had mentioned it earlier that, you know, these people were not drinking. They were trying to overcome. I'm trying to get the correct wording and I can't find it obviously right now. But, you know, they're drinking even though they don't want to. And this is, as I say, showing the progression of alcohol. And, you know, it's sad. You know, Bill's got opportunity after opportunity and he keeps screwing it up.
Yep.
So, Leo, it is 12:55. Do we want to bring Bill into it now?
We sure do. Bill, if you want to give a few words here. Thank you, sir.
Okay, hi, this is Bill, alcoholic from New Jersey. Thanks a lot for your presentation, Leo and Rob. You guys did a good job. There's really a lot of stuff in here, a lot of stuff to go over. We started on the doctor's opinion, and on page XXX, what the doctor says, he says, all these and many others have one symptom in common. They cannot start drinking without experiencing the phenomenon of cravings. So basically what this doctor is telling us, all you have to do is have the allergy. If you have the phenomenon of cravings, according to Dr. Silkworth, you're considered an alcoholic. You don't have to have any other symptoms. As long as you take a drink and you can't stop, you're an alcoholic. That could be the beginning stage or whatever you want to call it. We talked about Hank Parkhurst. He was in the hospital in 1935, in the fall of 1935, and that's when Bill found him in the hospital and helped him get sober. And he stayed sober for 4 years before he finally went back out again and drank. And there's a whole big story on him, and it would take too long to tell. He talks about, you mentioned that the doctor's opinion was moved. It was moved by a guy named Ed B. He was in charge of the second edition of the big book. And in the first edition, the doctor's opinion was on page 1. And they moved it for whatever reason. This guy moved it. He said it doesn't really belong in with the chapters. It belongs in with the forwards. And he moved it. He was in charge of putting the book together, assembling the second edition of the book, and he moved it. And then we get to chapter 1, Bill's story. And this is really a fantastic story. Originally, Bill's story was in the back of the book with the other stories. That's where they had it in like the original draft of the book before they came out with the book. And what they did is they sent it to the editor, and the editor's name was Tom Uzel. And he said the first chapter in the book was what we have as the second chapter today. There is a solution. And he said, this is the wrong setup for a book. You can't start off a book with there is a solution. First, you have to show a problem. So he moved Bill's story to the front of the book to be chapter 1, because he said, first you have to have a problem, and then you can have a solution. So he's the guy who moved Bill's story. And the reason he moved it there was to show the problem of alcoholism, so people could see what alcoholism was and what it did to somebody. And Bill's story is put together really, really great. It's got a lot of good stuff in it. And what it does, the parts that we went through, it's showing you the progression of alcoholism. How this guy started off drinking maybe once or twice a week or whatever, and then it gets more and more and more until he's up to the point where he's drinking every day. And like Leo pointed out, he says on page 5, liquor ceased to be a luxury. It became a necessity. This guy's not drinking for fun anymore. He's not drinking for enjoyment. He's drinking because he has to drink. And at this point, he's most likely drinking every single day. And he may have been drinking every day before that, I don't know. But when he says it became a necessity, that means he has to drink. He's crossed that line. He's no longer drinking because he wants to drink. Now he's drinking because he has to drink. And that's what this is trying to show us. It's trying to show us the progression of alcoholism, that no matter how hard you try not to drink, no matter how hard you try to stop, once you're an alcoholic, that's not going to work. Sooner or later, you're going to wind up drunk again, and it's going to get closer and closer together until you wind up drinking 24/7 like Bill was doing. And then you're going to need to either find a solution or you're going to either die or get locked up somewhere. That's all I got. Thanks a lot for letting me share.
Thanks very much, Bill.
Thanks, Bill. Okay, we're going to go ahead and we're going to close out with the Serenity Prayer, and then we'll just open things up for any questions or comments.
You got it, sir.
Rob.
Serenity Prayer. God, grant me the serenity to accept the things I cannot change, courage to change the things I can, and wisdom to know the difference.
Okay, well, I really do appreciate everybody being here today. We'll